Hello and welcome to the Warhammer Film Club, where I am joined by a guest every episode to talk about two movies that have inspired or informed our relationship with Warhammer and the hobby, as well as the actual history of the games themselves. Today, I am joined by the absolutely fabulous Pete the Wargamer, and we're going to be talking about a couple of really interesting picks. One is the movie Brazil from 1985, and the other isn't actually a movie, it is the BBC TV show of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy from 1981. But before we get into it, Pete, how are you doing, mate? You all right?
I'm very well, thank you very much for inviting me onto the film club. It's great to be here.
Thank you for coming. It's great to have you. We're going to be talking about, so your pick was Brazil, the Terry Gilliam film.
Yep.
Enormously influential, I think, Gilliam's work generally, and a lot of the associated work on Warhammer, I suppose. And let's just start from a question about it. Like, are you a big fan? Is it a movie that you enjoy?
Yeah, it's a film which I kind of came to quite late, really. It's not really something which I was aware of Warhammer before I was aware of Brazil. I was obviously aware of the other kind of works of Gilliam from like Monty Python and everything like that. So when I kind of got to, it was probably in my mid-20s, I kind of watched the film for the first time, and I was in this kind of, let's watch all these like dystopian post-apocalyptic films, and it kind of led on from that. And I watched this, and it was very different from everything that I'd watched because it has that absurdism to it. So I was quite, I kind of took a shine to the film as a result of that. It kind of took me off that edgy, I like this film because it's really dark and depressing, like The Road, and I was talking to you just before this about my obsession with nuclear war films. And it's kind of very much, it's in that universe. It's quite dark the more you think about it, but I think on the surface a bit more of a lighthearted to some degree, I would say.
Yeah, because it is like, when you do think about it or like look beneath the surface, it's incredibly bleak. Like the world of Brazil
it really is.
It's so dystopian in so many ways. But on the surface, a lot of it's, there's a bit of like silliness, and there's absurdity, and there's slapstick, and there's just like odd things. There's like petty grievances that like come up throughout, and all this sort of stuff. So it is kind of like, yes, on the surface, it's horrifying as a world as well. But the more you sort of dwell on it, the darker and darker it starts to feel.
Yeah, it's kind of like if you're watching or like reading 1984, and Winston Smith just kept cracking jokes every time, but everything else was the same. But he kind of had this kind of inner monologue of tape making fun of people, and that it would still exist in this really dark world, but there would be like that kind of maybe a little bit of comic relief to it as well. But I think sometimes it's also used, the absurdity in a way is almost used to underline some of the absurdities and what it satirizes in the real world. And I think that's kind of like a skill of Gilliam's to do that, to take something that is funny and kind of use that to make a stronger point about what it's against. But yeah, it is kind of it's a really interesting film, and there's a lot to talk about in there as well. So I've made some notes. So I've got some stuff plenty of stuff to talk about.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, my personal journey with it has been a strange one, really, because I think I watched a lot of Gilliam stuff when I was a lot younger, and I say that not to try and sound cool or anything, but just because I had older brothers who loved film, and they sort of introduced me to a lot of stuff. And when I was younger, I was watching all of these sort of Gilliam movies, and I struggled with them quite a lot because they are one of the way I would always describe Gilliam's work is just that it's like really grubby. It's really dirty and grubby. Like his worlds are all like gross and oppressive and horrible to look at, and I imagine to live in. And I didn't really like appreciate that was a big part of the point of most of his stuff. And then it's only over time and sort of studying film and sort of spending more time with it, every time I revisit one of his works, there's so much more to it, and I've really grown to like appreciate and love it. And I think Brazil is one of, I think it's probably a big conversation to be had about what his best work is, but Brazil's going to be in that conversation.
Yeah, definitely,
right,
definitely.
But yeah, I mean, it's just in terms of the story, it's kind of labyrinthine in the way it's plotted out, but
It
like
is,
by
yeah.
design, right? Because it
Yeah.
overlaps and folds on itself quite a lot. But essentially, it's the story of Sam Lowry, who's played by Jonathan Pryce, who
Hmm.
lives in this, very 1984 inspired dystopian future of bureaucracy and just like authoritarianism. He lives in this oppressive, almost hive city esque space, and he finds himself embroiled in kind of a cover up, but mostly like administrative bungling, where the wrong people has been included. The wrong person has been included in a been arrested for like sedition and all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
And then from then it sort of spirals out to him kind of falling in with rebellious elements and then going on the run and then trying to escape the very bureaucracy that he works for and is part of. So there's lots and lots and lots of like that everything is oppressive. Everybody is, it's very paranoid. It's kind of a very uncomfortable space, but within that he's also like he's got a very rich mother who's taking him out to dinner at this kind of absurd over the top restaurant.
Hmm.
He's you see all of the like high end people who live very nice cushy lives in this
Yeah.
world. But yeah, I mean, what's your feeling on like the story itself and the journey of Sam Lowry?
I think having watched this again before this, and kind of my memory of it isn't. So I think the first time I watched it, I think it's one of those films that you do have to watch maybe once or twice, just to kind of, well, two or three times, sorry, just to kind of get. There's a lot of stuff in there, and you mentioned like Gilliam the grubbiness. I think another kind of aspect of him is he just puts so much stuff into every scene, and there's a lot of if you're just watching it and you're just looking at the characters or listening to the dialogue, you're missing all those extra characters that are in the background that are just a poster on a wall or something which is built. Like, I mean, there's one of the characters which is throughout the film, and you wouldn't really regard it as a character, as the ducting, and that in itself offers a lot of insight without this kind of explicit exposition of this is what it's for, this is what it is. And yeah, I think as a story, it is very much it's quite a simple story on the face of it, but how it happens, and he is very much like this reluctant kind of protagonist who isn't necessarily doing stuff because these other people are pressuring him to. It's the organization, the world that he's living in. He's just trying to do what he thinks is like a good and nice thing to do. So I suppose we should probably just go into the actual like the plot of it. So
Yeah,
the actual the film starts off with a literal bug in a machine. And there's basically a machine that's been printing arrest warrants, and it's looking to print. It's supposed to be printing something for Archibald Tuttle, and a fly gets stuck in the machine, and it gets changed to Archibald Buttle, and it then kind of this is all happening before we've even been introduced to our initial Sam. There's a lot of stuff in that intro that kind of almost sets up the entire film just before you even see Sam at all. So it's really kind of interesting to see how the beginning of the film. I'm going back and forth a little bit here, but the beginning of the film starts off with a TV broadcast in a window, and then a switch to an advertisement, and then you kind of realize it's Christmas as well. Like kind of part of it, it's basically a Christmas film, which is
yeah,
at the time of recording this, it is Christmas. So it's kind of at the time I kind of forgot that it was a Christmas film as well, and it starts off with this kind of explosion happening in this shop window. So and that kind of explains it kind of gives you this line of consumerism. There's these ongoing terrorist attacks, which I've got a theory about, I'll talk about later, which kind of happen throughout the film. And then it goes to Fly, and then immediately it cuts to this nice kind of it's almost like a 1940s, 1950s style
yeah.
kind of living room. And there's a family there, and they're watching Christmas, something about Christmas on the TV, and they've got the decorations. And then all of a sudden this hole just appears in the ceiling, and it drops down, and then immediately all of these armed police officers kind of come bursting in to arrest who is Archibald Buttle. And this is obviously a mistaken arrest, this is a mistaken identity, but the immediately you actually get this kind of line of this bureaucracy that absolutely permeates the film completely.
Mm.
And the guy gets arrested, Butler gets arrested, and his wife has to sign the receipt.
Yes.
And it's like that's an immediate thing. But interesting that I don't know if you noticed this, but the arresting officer is
Simon Jones, right?
yeah, yeah. So and I didn't realize that until watching it a second time. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
it's got Simon Jones. So
Who is
kind
in
of
the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which we'll be talking about in a bit, which
yes,
was a very fun
exactly.
little
Yeah.
magical bit of overlap. I thought that was great.
And as soon as I saw, it, I was like, oh, that's Mo. And then he has a line. It's like, oh, this is your receipt, and this is my receipt for your receipt. And it's like immediately there, you've got this kind of extra layer of kind of bureaucratic diligence that's going on, and it happens incredibly quickly. They break in, they just arrest him, and they haul him out. And there's a really again, a lot happens even in this opening, and they came in through the apartments upstairs where we get introduced to one of the other main characters of the film, the love interest of the film. And she's in the apartment, and these maintenance guys come in, and they've got like this kind of like plug that they're going to plug up this hole that she's now got in her floor, and they push it into the hole, and it immediately falls through. And they're like, "Oh, we didn't get told. They must have switched to the metric system." And this hole, you see it again later on in the film, it just never gets filled in again. It's just this hole, and so that they almost had the procedure was to fill it in, but they had something had broken down, and it is immediately even before we even see Sam. You've kind of been given a really good introduction to this entire universe and how it works and really how it doesn't work. Like immediately mistakes are made. Several mistakes are made by this kind of monolithic system immediately. And I think that sets up the film quite nicely.
It does, absolutely, because it's very impactful. Like it's really, like you said, it's super sudden and like really in your face,
Yes.
and you feel the oppression of like this SWAT team coming in. But it's
Mhm.
also it's so illustrative of all of the issues, the bureaucracy, the red tape, the failings of those processes, both
Yeah.
in the mistaken identity in the first place, but
Hmm.
then also the hole in the ceiling. And those are certain things, and there's loads of stuff across the movie, but those kinds of things feel very in line with like the version of the Imperium in 40K that I imagine.
Yeah.
So like it is
Yes. Yes.
really, it's that I feel like so back in the Rogue Trader days, but maybe not quite so much now. It was really emphasized about like a typo in some scribe's like litany or whatever that they were working on would mean that a planet was left unattended for
Yeah.
1,000 years. Just the
Yeah.
Imperium would forget about it because a document
Hmm.
was lost or misfiled, so the tides
Yeah.
were never collected or anything like that. That feels like directly in line with this like version of this
Yeah.
world. Like it's all of these systems exist, but they're so
Hmm.
big, the bureaucracy is so
Yeah.
massive, it's so absurd and down to such a level of it's like specificity that no
Yeah.
one can keep on top of it. So actually, none of it really works, even though it's all there.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is kind of where you start to see that inspiration, and it definitely. I mean, even though I've not seen anything, I've not been able to find anything. Maybe you have, like that kind of directly references the events of Brazil, but there's just so much about that film which is just kind of mirrored in 40K. I think it's in one of I believe it's in one of the Eisenhorn novels, and it's like it's quite a throwaway line where people will travel to the kind of the administratum hubs, and they will queue for generations to
Right.
petition their governor of the system, because there's this like, and then they know full well it's going to be they're going to kind of have they're going to grow up, they're going to have kids, their kids are going to grow up and have kids, and then it's going to be maybe 3 or 4 generations before you actually get to deliver your petition to
Sure.
have some extra machinery for your agro world. And then by that point it's already been swallowed by a warp storm, or um
Yeah.
it's gone by
Yeah.
that point. And it's kind of like this kind of a very much an absurdist look. And it's great as well, because if you look at some of the stuff that Terry Gilliam talks about, he says that this isn't a sci-fi film. He doesn't see it as being a sci-fi film. It seems it more as like what was existing in the 1980s and even going through to now. More of like an emphasized version of that. Like the technology that you see in that film is it kind of looks more techy than it actually is, but a lot of the stuff is like practically built as well. So there's still things like pneumatic tubes being used to deliver messages between people. There's a computer system, it's a database, which is all very much kind of the computers are incredibly well designed. I think that they're off. I think some of the back behind the scenes stuff was talking about they would take an actual computer, they would take the cover off it so you could see all the wires, and they would stick the tiniest screen that they could get their hands on because it was so small. Then they needed to blow it up with this like big kind of concave lens which distorted everything, and it's this kind of grungy kind of function over form look that again is seen so often in the 41st millennium
Yeah.
and kind of Necromunda and things like that. You see this it's everything's very brutal in terms of how it's designed. It has that brutalist kind of look to it. It's not designed to be sleek, it's not designed to be fancy, and when you do see the fancier stuff, it's almost like anachronistic because it's all like this old kind of style pillars and
Mm.
cathedral like spaces. And yeah, watching it is just incredible. There's actually a very small kind of blink and you miss it scene, which I thought was quite interesting as well. Quite near the beginning when Sam's going to work and he's in the foyer of the Department of, is it information retrieval that he works in?
Right.
There's a stand and there's some kind of like security guards and they've got some guns on a table. And there's a bunch of nuns who go over and they're asking about the guns and like what they'd be used for. And I just thought it's like a very kind of that little tiny bit of like nuns with guns kind of thing is very much 40K. And I thought it's quite just like this like tiny little tidbit there.
Yeah.
I thought was really interesting when I saw it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this film is so close to like the feel, what I will say is the look and the feel of Ian Watson's Inquisitor novel.
Mm-hmm.
So, like,
Yeah.
if you were ever going to make, I mean, I know there's the famous discussion that Kubrick was interested in at one point in making a movie based on Inquisitor, but I think this Terry Gilliam of this era, this is based. It's so close. Like, obviously, there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of like the specifics of the technology and the wider world of 40K, but like this plays exactly as I would expect an Inquisitor movie to sort of
Yeah.
operate and look and feel. And exactly like you say, when you actually go to Terra and there are just these cues that are generational, like it's absurd. That's exactly the same kind of absurdity that you see here in this
Yeah.
movie all the time. There's loads of stuff that's just completely over the top and completely ridiculous. I love those computers that you mentioned as well, where
They're
yeah,
great. Yeah.
the actual screen is tiny, so they have to have these massive like magnifying things on because it does just look like it looks really sci-fi and silly and functional at the same time. Like it kind of bridges
Mm-hmm.
so much stuff to make it kind
Yeah.
of feel right. And you kind of even see it. I would argue probably like in the Matrix. Many years later, like the Matrix's version of the real world, so like on their ships and stuff. Even that kind of feels like there's a little bit of a connection visually in the design
Yeah. Yeah.
to way
Definitely.
back to here in terms of like the look and the feel of the tech because it's kind of like run down but functional but
Mm-hmm.
science fictional at the same time. It's great. It's as a world it is so well realized and so cool
Yeah.
and so interesting. But yeah, the narrative of course being so horrifying in so many
Yeah.
ways that it's upsetting as well. It's uncomfortable to watch at times.
It is. I mean, there's to kind of build upon your point about the Matrix there. I think it's not only like an aesthetics thing. I think actually, if you view the film as so I think Sam he works for the Department of Information Retrieval. He's very good at his job. You kind of see his competency throughout the film when he kind of is involved. And his boss is I think it's Kurtzum, is played by Ian Holm, who's obviously appears in Alien, Lord of the Rings. So again, there's another kind of
Mm,
through line to kind of like the British that kind of like British pantheon of actors who kind of appeared in these films that influenced 40K.
mm,
And so yeah, he's very, very good at his job. And at that point you realize that he exists almost within the machine at that point. He's very much part of the bureaucracy that kind of rules this world. And whilst he's in it, he doesn't really see the problems that it causes because he's kind of like looking at it from the inside. And um, so as part of the story, he basically ends up with this check that's been sent from I think it's the Department of Information Retrieval. It's basically it's kind of covered more later on, but there's a lot of kind of like they realize mistakes were made. They've got the wrong guy. They've got Archibald Buttle instead of Tuttle, and then under interrogation, Buttle has died. So they're trying to kind of refund his wife for the costs of his incarceration, which is it's kind of again it's referenced later on in the film as well. But in this world, you have to pay for your own imprisonment and everything that goes on. And I think at the time, I think Terry Gilliam was basing this on some things that were happening in South America at the time that like people were getting actually charged for it. But anyway, they realize something's gone wrong, so they're trying to issue this refund. But the department that actually killed him doesn't want to issue the refund because they don't want to have their name associated with it, so they pass it on to a different department. And Sam's trying to kind of issue this refund, and it seems like a really small thing to happen, but it's what really kicks off the whole string of events that happens throughout the rest of the film. And he realizes that he can't do it through the system. She doesn't have a bank account, so he can't issue like an actual like a direct bank transfer or anything like that. So he has to go and hand deliver this check to her. And that's kind of when he first emerges from this world of bureaucracy. And that's like, if you view that as being the Matrix, like his world, his apartment's it's quite a nice apartment. It's not a huge apartment. It's got like all the mod cons. And we mentioned that his mum's quite wealthy. So he's obviously got like, he's had involvement with that more kind of higher class of living that happens in this world. And he has to go out and to this apartment block. And it's probably the closest we've seen to like a hab block in like in a 40K universe, in my opinion. And there's just this fantastic shot that when he's driving, so he first of all he's in this little bubble car, which is actually a real car, which I was really interested to find out. It's like a real that Messerschmitt built in the 1950s. The only thing they did was add this this kind of mini jet engine to the back of it. And but it's a real car, and he's driving it out. So he kind of cuts from him driving along, and there's all these big kind of heavy industrial vehicles driving past, and then it cuts to this kind of this shot of him going down an alley, this like avenue, and there's these buildings which have they're cooling towers, but they're painted with blue with like clouds on. And I always found that quite interesting because the amount of like, if you see warehouses when you're driving down motorways, they kind of truly recreated that effect where they paint the warehouses in this kind of like blue to white gradient, so it doesn't look as obvious. It looks like it blends into the sky. Right. So it's almost like these big cooling towers that they try to hide, but they've painted these little cartoon kind of clouds on it. And then all of a sudden, this kind of guy's face just looms over the clouds, and you realize that you've been looking at a little model of what this housing complex was supposed to have looked like when it was built. And then you actually see what it looks like when it's been built, and it's run down. There's trash, there's grimy concrete everywhere, and it's kind of like Sam's first kind of realization that this is the real world in a way, like the world of paperwork and everything that he's existed in is very much not the real world that most people are existing in at that point. And going back to that what we were talking about, where there are scenes which are kind of very humorous and very absurdist. And when he goes to the apartment and he confronts Archibald Buttle's wife, and she's in like a catatonic state. She's that kind of removed from the situation because her husband's dead. She knows her husband's dead. Like there's no kind of doubt about that. But all of a sudden, from her point of view, this instrument of the government, the instrument of this machinery that's kind of mistakenly taken her husband and killed him, has appeared in a doorway and is trying to do something nice. It's trying to give her back this money. And you kind of, her kind of screams of anguish, it really shifts the tone of the film, like instantly, like straight away. And I feel like that's kind of the point that everything kind of changes. And it's almost like that is like Neo's break from the Matrix, when he kind of actually realizes, okay, the world is very different here. And just before that scene as well, when he's kind of going to his house, you see all the children who are playing these kind of like games with the police. They're playing like they've seen all these abductions happen where people literally get a sack put over them, like a straitjacket kind of sack thing, and they're recreating this as like as a form of play down in the bottom of these hab towers, basically. And I think at the beginning of the film, there's like an action figure of the police officers, of these like SWAT team members, and that's
Right.
like that toys that are being sold. So you almost like have this police state, and the children have obviously seen this because that's why they're recreating it. And yeah, I think from there is when everything kind of starts to spiral more throughout the
Mm.
film. And I mean, there's so many details. I could probably talk about this for so long. The film's how was long times like 2 hours, something like that, two
Sure.
and a half hours. You can probably talk about the film for like 4 or 5 times that, just
Yeah.
get all the plot points in.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's so much, and it does kind of, there's still that absurdist humor afterwards, but everything's kind of viewed more of like, oh no, this isn't just like a silly world where things don't
Sure.
work as well. There is a much darker side
Yeah.
to that existence.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think because before that point, Sam and the world, it's like dehumanized
Yeah,
people. Like they are just they're numbers on a piece of paper. They're
yeah,
typos. They're whatever. They're kind of meaningless to the people at the
mhm.
top, the people who live in the spire, as it were. Sam becomes our sort of well, but not quite because he's not a good guy still. I think there's
Yeah,
flaws to Sam
yeah,
throughout the
very much so.
film. Like he's still quite selfish and still sort of trying to return to his comfortable life in a way
Mhm.
throughout the film, and he's driven also by his sort of lusty obsession
Yeah,
with Jill, who is the
yeah,
neighbor who lives upstairs. But he does, like you say, he starts to realize that these are people, and that yeah, in the
mhm.
house because like you said, it was like it's kind of like a 40s sort of Christmas, like an old school 40s or 50s Christmas before Buttle gets taken away, and
Yeah,
then you see the sort of aftermath of that. They did have they didn't have much, but they had a happy life because
yeah,
they were
yeah,
together as a family, and now that family is destroyed, and it's
yeah,
destroyed the people who are left. So it is quite hard. It's like a tough
mhm.
scene, and it does then inform a lot of what happens later. There is still loads of silly stuff. There's some great stuff. We've not even talked about like Robert De Niro,
No,
who's in a few scenes as Harry Tuttle. So he's actually the person who they were searching for.
yeah,
He's I think he's absolutely brilliant in this film. I love Harry Tuttle. He's so good because he's kind
he's
of
a great
this.
character.
He's so good. He's a freedom fighting air conditioning repairman,
Yeah,
which is just brilliant. It's stupid and brilliant. And there's also because there's like a running gag with the air conditioning ducts, and
yeah.
there's an issue in Sam's apartment where he needs to get. It's Bob Hoskins plays the one
Yeah,
of the air
he
conditioning
he plays a plumber in a red suit before he played
yes,
Mario in a few years later.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's right. And he also has like a hapless brother
yeah,
esque
little Louis.
character
Yeah,
with him as well, right?
very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So you've got all that sort of, and there's kind of like that funny running gag around the repairman because Sam doesn't follow procedure because he ultimately
mhm.
ends up getting help from Harry Tuttle to repair his air ducts. The Bob Hoskins and the other chap are just they then become really petty and spiteful,
Yeah,
and there's
yeah,
loads of like really petty revenge because they've not because Sam's not followed the paperwork.
yeah, yeah.
It's great, and that speaks to the sort of just how all of that stuff has permeated like literally every level. It's corrupted all of society
Hmm.
because either you are someone at the very bottom rung, like the poor kids in the hab blocks who are like their childhood has been taken away. They're playing police
Yeah,
games and abductions is their gameplay, through to just like people who are just the everyday workers who have become so spiteful and sort of they follow all of the bureaucracy and they just inconvenience one another because that they're just
yeah.
angry right the way up to the top, where it's just
Hmm.
completely corrupted. So there's loads of fascinating comments and like the commentary on society and the dangers around this kind of this future.
Yeah.
It is across the board. There's just warnings about every different aspect of
Hmm.
letting the world go into this in society to become this. Um,
Yeah.
but then the sort of through line from this point becomes the kind of adventure story almost that Sam
Yeah.
gets
Yeah.
embroiled in, where Jill, the neighbor, is actually sort of involved in some way in
Hmm.
these terrorist attacks or the sort of rebellion that's fermenting in society and sort of trying to cause problems. And Sam inadvertently, because he does become obsessed with her, he's been dreaming
Hmm.
about this woman and then he sees her. Um, and those dreams themselves, I'm sure we'll talk about in a minute, are really super interesting.
Yeah.
But he then kind of gets involved in this in the sort of in the rebellion, in the sort of the terrorist plots, and then he
Yeah.
becomes a he manages to get himself a promotion just so he can
Hmm.
stalk Jill
Yep.
and find out who
Basically,
she
yeah. Yeah.
is.
It's quite creepy. Yeah.
Yeah, he's proper creep.
Yeah.
So that's why he's not a good guy. But he
Yeah.
then, he does some good things potentially,
Yeah.
but for bad reasons, I
Yeah.
suppose.
He's a nepo baby stalker, isn't he? At some
Yes,
points in
he
the
is.
film. Yeah.
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
It's interesting. The terrorist stuff is really interesting because I think when I first watched it, I was kind of like, oh yeah, there's something going on here. But then when you watch it a second time and you kind of realize that the kind of the central services that the Bob Hoskins character works for is like one of these repair guys, and how kind of inept they are and how terrible they are at the job and how badly, I mean, these ducks absolutely permeate everything. Every single scene has a duct in there somewhere. And it's kind of like that they just kind of started adding things on. They haven't hidden things in walls or in ceilings. They've just been like, we need something to come through here. It's going to go through the room. Doesn't matter how inconvenient it is. And there's a bit in the restaurant where he's kind of having lunch with his mother. And it's a really kind of nice, fancy restaurant. It's a very high class establishment. And there's still ducks going through. But because it's a high class, fancy restaurant, there's mirror mosaic on there, so it looks like a glitter ball, because it's obviously it's fancy ductwork. But these terrorist attacks that happen, we never actually see these terrorists. We never actually, and apparently it's been going on 13 years. A little bit at the beginning, it's like, oh, we're going to get a handle on it soon. It's only been going on for 13 years, kind of thing. And I actually wonder if it's nothing to do with actually anyone. It's just that the maintenance and the inefficiency of these ducts and these cablings that we see inside Sam's apartment later on, how much there is behind these walls, that it's basically malfunctioning and things are just exploding because of poor maintenance or poor design. And then rather than central services and the government saying, oh yes, this is actually our fault, it's, oh no, there's someone there doing it.
Mm.
And someone like Harry Tuttle, who's this kind of, he kind of isn't really doing it as a freedom fighter. He just likes the job that he does and doesn't like paperwork. So he almost becomes this kind of SAS Navy SEAL type character who just comes in and fixes stuff. And it's not because he necessarily he has like he mentions like we're all in this together, but he hasn't really got like a political agenda. He's not like doing it to overthrow the government. He's just doing it to help people out. And it's the same with Jill as well. I mean, we kind of see her as well, and it's actually through the lens of Sam's paranoia and his belief that there are terrorists that he kind of views her as a terrorist. But there's actually no real evidence again that she is one. She drives out in a truck to get this kind of executive desk toy gift that seems to just be everywhere throughout the film. Obviously,
Yeah.
it's Christmas, so everyone's getting the exact same gift.
Yeah.
And it's basically a pendulum that drops, that you crank up, and it drops and it lands on either yes or no. And it's the most simple kind of gift ever. But she basically uses it as a bribe. But again, there's no real evidence there. Like Sam believes that she's acquired this bomb, this explosive that later goes off in a department store. But then he realizes it isn't her at all. It's just something that's happened. And then you kind of start to realize that there isn't really anything in there that other than what you're being told by the government or being told by Sam. There's no terrorists. There's no actual one purposely trying to do this stuff. It is just the machine, the system. And at the end of the film as well, we kind of skip a lot through, but at the end, Sam is branded a terrorist. And arguably, he's probably, out of everyone who's been branded a terrorist up to that point, he kind of accidentally ended up in that situation. Yeah. He accidentally caused this an armored personnel carrier to crash and burn, and he's probably the only person who actually purposely kills anyone in the film. And he doesn't do it necessarily to kill, but he's just trying to get away, and that's all he does. And as such, he's branded as a terrorist. And there's a line throughout the film as well that it's very easy to miss, but that little car that he takes out, he checks. It's not his car; it's one that's like assigned to the ministry, and he checks it out. And when it gets burnt at the Hab block, some kids set fire to put it on bricks and set fire to it. So when he goes back, he's kind of getting questioned like, "Oh, did you return this?" And it starts out as a personal carrier, and then that gets misconstrued to a personnel carrier. And so he's like, and he does correct it, but then it kind of keeps getting mentioned throughout the film. And by the end of the film, it's apparently he's stolen 7 personnel carriers when it's just this one little car that he had, this like tiny little 2-seater car that he had at the beginning of the film. But the charges get ramped up because it's almost like going through this this system where no one really knows what's going on, so they kind of mishear something, or it's a mistake on a form, and it kind of these charges get blown up. And at the end of the film, you realize he's kind of been committing so many crimes throughout the course of the film, and is this kind of list of crimes is getting read to him towards the end, and it's kind of it's scary really, because a lot of that is just existing in the film. He's not even doing anything malicious. He's not doing anything to hurt anyone directly. He's actually trying to help people in a lot of situations. But he ultimately gets branded this terrorist, this kind of dangerous person, just by the system that he exists in. And the kind of the worst part is there's no real maliciousness done. There's no singular villain who rules this world, who you can kind of point to as a big bad, and it is just everyone following the same set of rules, and that is what it becomes the villain in the end. And I think that's probably one of the scariest parts. There's no way of, you can't just assassinate the leader and then the world's going to be better. It's not like a V for Vendetta where you have these characters that you can kind of kill off and the world will suddenly work itself out. There's no singular person. There's no singular linchpin that's holding the system together. It is just so big and so interconnected. It's going to be like this Gordian knot of bureaucracy that can't be untangled or destroyed.
Yeah, I think that's a great read across the board, actually. Yeah, because I think that's like the system is the enemy, and it is very, very hard, if not impossible, to like defeat the system in this world. And there is no single person that you can take out. All of the people in authority that we see, they're actually relatively inept, or they don't care. So like Ian Holm, who is his boss at the start, he has to do a lot of his work for him because he's not very good at his job.
Yeah.
And then the boss who he then has when he gets his promotion is just constantly walking around like he's in the TV show The West Wing, constantly having walking talks with like 20 people, a gaggle of people around him. Doesn't really do anything. He
just says yes or no. Yeah,
exactly.
That's the only thing. And I think that's what the little executive toy is getting at, where he never reads anything that is handed to him. He's just like yes, no, yes, no.
Right. Exactly.
Do that. Yeah.
Exactly that. So there isn't any sort of way to win. You can't really escape the system. We'll find out by the end that you can't really escape the system at all. And your point about Harry Tuttle, the De Niro character as well, is totally bang on. He isn't trying to overthrow anything. There's nothing to overthrow. It's just all of society. So he is just trying to sort of get on, and what he gets on by doing is by just, fixing air conditioning machines without doing any paperwork at all. He does, I think, probably kill like Bob Hoskins and his mate by filling up their like suit. At one point
with the sewage,
because they turn off, or they max out the air conditioning in his apartment in order to make it freezing cold, just to spite him. And they're wearing like survival suits,
plastic suits, yeah.
And then Harry Tuttle like reverses the airflow with the sewage flow, and then fills up their suits with sewage. So I'm pretty certain those guys are dead by the end of the movie. But yeah, other than that, Harry Tuttle is just like having these adventures fixing air conditioning. I absolutely love. There's just like a little special effect for when he constantly is like ziplining and abseiling away, because these are this is like the Spire. The city is just enormous. The apartment blocks are huge and just go on forever. And so when he's sort of fixed something, he just sort of says "see ya" and then zip lines away, and the camera follows him over the balcony. And then a little miniature they've used in order to do it, sort of going away. Yeah. I think it's so cool. I love it. I think
there's some fantastic miniatures work. I mean, there's the dream sequences that we see where Sam's kind of like in this like shiny silver arm with the wings, and he's kind of flying around. That was a miniature that they used. So they had like a miniature, kind of like an Action Man sized, or G.I. Joe for the Americans, kind of figure, and he was basically had these like mechanical wings, and they used smoke to create the cloud effects. And I think they had to kind of run it. They had to kind of run it a lot faster because they had to slow down the footage afterwards to create this like wistful cloud effects. But there's so much miniature work in this. I mean, there's the armored personnel carriers I mentioned later on. Those are miniatures. A lot of the sets of miniatures, or they have kind of like matte paintings to kind of expand them out and things like that. So I think just from a filmmaking point of view, the kind of the thoughts that have gone into the set then, because I don't think there's like I don't believe there's any CG in this at all. I think
I'd
a
be
lot of stuff is maybe
surprised. Yeah, I
like
don't know. It would have been
it'd be
around.
base.
Yeah,
Yeah, so it was 84, was it?
85, I
1984?
think.
85, yeah, 1985. So we've been making in around that time. So whilst it was kind of just starting in, a lot of it was miniatures. It was probably in camera stuff, or like maybe some compositions after the fact, but it was all very much very kind of low tech filmmaking. But I think to create a world as believable as it is, it actually did a fantastic job. You feel like when he's in this maze of of apartments and stuff like that, you feel like it's actually that big of a world. And a lot of this is interiors. A lot of this that you see is you're not outside for a bit. There's one shot where we are outside, and again, it probably is like a matte painting. I think he's driving back to the city after picking up this package with Jill, and he's driving along a highway, and the highway is completely boarded off on each side with just adverts along the whole way, and the cameras above those so they can see, and it's just this kind of like blasted, polluted wasteland, and you can see the city in the distance, and it's so much like these kind of like hive spires, like on Armageddon, where it kind of peaks up into the middle central bit, and you don't really see any of that whilst you're in the city because you're kind of on the ground and you're just a small kind of thing. But when you're outside and you're like looking at the city from the distance, and yeah, I think it's strange. It's almost like if you imagine this could exist in the 41st millennium. It could be a planet that's been sealed off from. It kind of inherited a little bit of that imperial bureaucracy, and then it's been sealed off and lost, and it's kind of existing in its own world. And it very much could do, because it has that through line of there is technology, but it's not really, people don't really understand it that well. It doesn't look like it's kind of developing all that much. And everything is kind of a mixture of this anachronistic cathedral architecture and this higher tech kind of technology just starting to creep in, but it's almost been bolted on. It's not integrated into it. It's been added on with the ductwork and the pipes and
Yeah,
things like that.
yeah, completely. Yeah, yeah. I think that's an interesting shout. Yeah, because it could exist as one of these places that's, it's 250 years since the last interaction with the Imperium, and there'll be another tithe soon. But
Yeah.
you mentioned the dream sequences, which
Yeah.
are probably where it gets the sort of, well, it's not the most surreal. I'll come back to that, but there's like surreal elements to it, and
Yeah.
basically he does picture himself. Sam pictures himself as this kind of angelic figure with
Yeah.
wings, and sort of, but it's also mechanical. It's a suit
Yeah.
of armor. It's kind of, Space Marine sort of Blood Angel
Yeah.
kind of in
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
way. And in those dream sequences, he's pursuing Jill, or who he'll discover is Jill. I guess she could just be the representation of, a love or a companion, if you like.
Yeah.
But he's pursuing this woman, and then he ends up encountering a few different, like, very strange things within this world. First of all, there's these amazing, like, incredibly designed, almost like baby faced, kind of like hunched over, kind of remind me almost of things from Labyrinth, or the Dark
Yeah.
Crystal.
Yeah.
There's kind of like a real, they're very uncomfortable looking creatures, and they capture Jill and they put her into this cage that floats, and that's just such a cool visual. Like, all of that stuff looks amazing. And then there's a fight that Sam has to have with a giant samurai. Just
Yeah.
this enormous. It's shot so well. It looks
It
so
is.
good. It's
It
just
is really
amazing.
good. And the armor of the samurai is kind of inlaid with circuit boards and circuitry and things like that. So he's kind of this. I did see someone making the point, like, because when he defeats the samurai in the end, and the samurai kind of falls over, we have that kind of like Empire Strikes Back moment where he kind of removes the faceplate and realizes it's actually him. And I saw someone making the point that samurai kind of like Sam URI. So it's almost like, I was like, okay, it's a bit of a
Yeah,
stretch,
yeah,
but yeah,
yeah.
okay, it works. Um, and it's interesting because it's kind of like it goes back to that thing where he's almost fighting this enemy. He thinks that this is the person who is the singular figure, but it's just a representation of this kind of completely. It doesn't have a singular point of like a target where you've got a villain. It's this bureaucratic organization, and he's distilled it down into this single character who he defeats. But then when he realizes that he's actually part of that, he works for this government. He's part of these. He's processed these receipts and these arrest warrants and things like that, and he's not really thought anything for it. And it's almost like at that point he maybe is starting to realize that that is where his role in this. So everything he doesn't like, he realizes he's very much a part of it. And I think that's quite an interesting, from what I've seen, like an interesting take of just what that scene means.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, I always try not to look too deeply into. I mentioned before this. I did film studies at A level. So when I was about 16, 17, 18, and I think after doing that, there's sometimes you can kind of get too much down a line of trying to put meaning into things that don't really exist. And so that's obviously, some people enjoy that, but it's an interesting take that I saw, and I thought it'd be interesting to mention. But yeah, I did also feel like it's very much like Empire Strikes Back at this point when the mask explodes. And it's actually he thinks he's defeated Darth Vader, and it's Luke instead. But yeah, those kind of dream sequences are very, very. They're quite nice. They take. And I think as the film goes on, they seem more fantastical at the beginning, and then they actually almost converge. I mean, they really do converge by the very end of the film. The dream sequences converge with real life, but they start off as he's soaring in the air. There's clouds. It's kind of like bright sunlight. And then he kind of becomes grounded. And then throughout that, this film almost kind of converges to the point where his dream world and his reality coexist effectively. And by the end of the film, he's basically, what we think is happening is that he's being rescued by Harry Tuttle, and he's been captured. He's about to be interrogated by his friend. We haven't mentioned.
Jack Lint.
He's played by Michael Palin, and he's throughout the film, he's kind of this like really nice, affable guy. He's a really friendly guy, and then you start to see these little bits where Sam visits him later on in the film, and he realizes he's basically like one of the head torturers. So he works for information retrieval, and on the face of that, you think, okay, that means just like he's an archivist. He gets stuff out of the records, and no, he's retrieving information from people using sharp implements. And he's this really kind of like nice, friendly guy, but then he's almost like so detached from his work as well. And there's this scene where he's talking about he's the one who actually killed Archibald Tuttle. But Archibald Buttle.
Easy mistake to make.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And he's very much like, he doesn't feel sorry for it. He's only sorry for the fact that a mistake was made in the system, not what he did. He doesn't feel guilty for it. From his point of view, he did what he was delivered Archibald Tuttle from his perspective. And if someone else messed up and given Buttle, well, that's not his problem. He did his job. And it is that kind of, even when people do make a mistake, even when people are on the very kind of, they're on the cutting edge of what the system means to people and how it actually affects people, they can still say, I'm just following orders. I was just doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I didn't make mistakes, someone else did. And you kind of start to see this veneer of this really kind of affable guy. He probably is quite a nice person, but also has this very much a darker side, but he's able to separate that because he's protected by this system that he exists in. And it's like, oh, well, this is my job. It's just my job. I don't take it personally. Yeah. I think I think before this film was released, they were kind of pressured to make some changes, and it was originally going to be a lot less kind of dark than it actually is. And I think there was a scene with Michael Palin in his office that was reshot, and Jack is much more kind of guilty over it. He says, oh, well, it's a problem. I haven't slept for weeks over it, kind of over the mistake. And that nearly got released, and it had much more like a happy ending at the end as well. And a few scenes were changed. And I think Gilliam campaigned to have his original vision released and not this kind of studio meddled version of the film, this kind of sanitized version. And I think there's some of those clips still available on YouTube. I think you can still find some of them, and it really does change for the worse, in my opinion. But it does make it, it does make it a bit more. It takes the edge off that darkness, I would say. But yeah, so by the end, he's kind of Sam is captured, and he ends up in the torturer's chair, and it's his friend Jack, and Jack comes over, and again Jack is blaming Sam for him having to now torture him. Like
Yeah.
he's like, why did you do this? Why have you done this? Now I've got to torture you, my friend. Like I'm not going to help you. I'm not going to rescue you. I'm not going to go easy on you. I am going to torture you now because that's what I'm supposed to do. And then at that point, um, Harry Tuttle comes. I was getting mixed up. Harry Tuttle kind of drops in on these rappelling lines with these other guys with him who are dressed all in the military gear, and they shoot the way out of the Ministry of Information. And there's like a chase through the streets, and he kind of has this kind of it starts off and you think okay, but then as the scene progresses, the end of the film progresses, it starts to get stranger and stranger. Like Harry is defeated by paperwork,
Yeah,
like literally flying around. Yeah. And
Yeah.
he's just walking through the street and a lot of that paper gets stuck to him and then more gets stuck to him. And then eventually he just kind of disappears in this paperwork.
Yeah.
And then it's that point you start to think, oh, something's not right here. Something's not going on as it should be. And that's like after the whiplash of the film suddenly becoming this 1980s action film
Yeah.
for a few scenes
Yeah.
of people that are shooting their way out. And then he I think it's after that scene that he goes to the funeral. We haven't mentioned that his mom and his mom's friend yet, have we?
Sure.
And so throughout the film, we have his mom and her plastic surgeon, who's played by Jim Broadbent.
Right.
And she starts the film off looking quite old, and she's basically having this plastic surgery done throughout the film. And
Yeah.
she's got she's having traditional plastic surgery with like a scalpel, but
Yeah.
a friend is having the acid technique.
Right.
And her plastic surgeon, their plastic surgeons meet at a party, and they have this kind of rivalry about which technique is better. But throughout the film, Sam's mom is kind of getting younger and younger looking, and her friend is just kind of getting more and more disheveled, and she's got more bandages over because this acid technique isn't working. And by the time we get to the very end of the film, his mom is actually played by the same actress that plays Jill, because she's gone so young, she's become the same age as Sam now in terms of the way she looks. Whereas the friend is now this kind of pile of gelatinous substance and bones in this coffin because the friend's had that much acid-based plastic surgery. She's now just like dissolved. And then that's when Sam kind of falls into the coffin, and you realize, okay, this is a dream sequence. He's very much still in that chair at the end. It's not very. It doesn't kind of make you think that okay, yeah, he's actually managed to escape to the countryside, the green, pleasant land with Jill, and they've got this little house there and this little farm in the rolling hills. He's actually just completely gone back into his own world, and in a way, I feel like that kind of. He was almost in his own world at the beginning of the film, and he saw the real world, and the real world pushed him into this fantasy world.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's quite a kind of sad downer ending, but I think it's probably the best you can hope in that situation, I think.
Right. Yeah. This is a really interesting thing, isn't it? Because yeah, it does. So it plays out his initial sort of dream sequence, his escape is very much informed by what, cliched action movie stuff. And like Harry Tuttle does stuff he hasn't done in the entire rest of the movie, but because he exists as this person outside of the system, that's why Sam then imagines, oh, well, he's outside of the system, he can break me out of it.
He can rescue me.
And you get all of that sort of stuff. But yeah, even within that like fantasy escape sequence, he can't escape the paperwork, the bureaucracy, the horrors of this society. And yeah, he just ultimately ends up in a dream sequence of him and Jill driving away, having this perfect life. But it is because he's had a complete like break from reality. And that's where the film ends, basically. Jack is stood over him, and he's in the torturer's chair. So you kind of have this really super bleak ending. Nobody can escape this system. Nothing has changed. Nothing good has happened. I think Jill is even dead at that point, has been killed during his arrest. We don't know for certain that did happen or not, but it seems pretty likely. It's super bleak. But then also the music that's playing is it's like very famous, like very light and airy. Sam's having a great time in his little dream world. So it's kind of is it a happy ending for Sam or not?
I think that's the big thing, isn't it? Where you kind of think, well, if that's his vision of reality, then he kind of has escaped. He's like
Mm,
he's not escaped in the traditional way that he's physically left the world that he's in. He's kind of had to do that kind of in his own mind, and he is happy at that point. He's kind of like humming along. I think it's the song's "Watercolor of Brazil,"
right.
and I think that's kind of why that's why the film is called Brazil, because it's not set in Brazil. There's no
Yeah.
Brazilian characters or anything like that. I think Terry Gilliam said the idea came about because he was in Port Talbot, which is a very kind of uh, industrial steelmaking town city in Wales, and I think he was on the beach, and because there's so much kind of like industry, the sands were like black with like coal dust, so the beach was like this kind of like black sand or strewn with coal, and there was just a guy sat in a deck chair playing this music, and it was just this comparison of this kind of really nice, bright, kind of happy, colorful music compared against this kind of gray, drab 1980s industrial town in that's an industrial start on that decline throughout the 80s.
Mm,
And you can kind of like that really does sum up the entirety of the film. There's kind of an escapism that people try to achieve. His mom tries to make herself look younger. That's how she tries to escape the system. Jack is kind of like this family man. He's got like there's a really good joke at the beginning where I think Sam thinks he's got twins, but he's actually got triplets. And I can't remember the exact wording of the joke, but you'll notice it if you watch it again. And it kind of alludes to the fact that it's been so long, he's now got triplets. Like he hasn't spoken to him in such a while, he's now got triplets, and no, he's always had triplets. And there's a kind of a faux pas when he meets Jack's wife, and he's talking about how her ears were reduced in size, but Jack thinks it was something else that was reduced. And it's kind of that everyone has their own way of maybe dealing with this world. And I think the irony is that Sam's way of dealing with it actually causes a lot more problems for everyone. If he hadn't have pursued Jill in the way he did, she probably would have just been able to get on with life. She wasn't. I think part of the reason why she became more of a target in the end was because of Sam.
mm.
She was already kind of involved because she was the neighbor. She was trying to help Archibald Buttle's wife out because that's what she kind of was at the ministry for in the first place, and that's kind of what painted this target on her back. And she was trying to help someone else. She was trying to kind of do something with someone else, and she ended up kind of suffering for that. And Sam tried to help people and help himself as well. Let's face it, he isn't this kind of
Mm.
glowing paragon of virtue that he thinks he maybe is in his dream sequences. But yeah, there's sorry, I've written notes as well. There's another little cameo in there as well, which reminded me. There's Gordon Kay played Renee in Allo Allo.
Right.
He's one of the desk clerks, I think, at
Sure.
the ministry that Jill speaks to. And I thought it's just kind of anyone who's watching this who isn't kind of into like British comedy from the 70s and 80s won't recognize half the people in this film, but there is a lot of kind of crossovers. There's obviously there's a couple of Game of Thrones characters in there as well. I think the guy who plays Halpman was one of the maesters in Game of Thrones who's at the wall. I forget his name now. And obviously I forget his name now. Who played Sam? Jonathan Pryce.
Jonathan Pryce, yeah.
Yes, he played High Sparrow.
High Sparrow, that's right.
Yeah. So it's kind of like it is always the case whenever you're watching anything that's British. It's always this kind of like Avengers Assemble Endgame of all these different crossover characters that have been in everything, which is always really interesting. I'm just trying to make sure I'm not missing any of my notes here. There's another bit in the restaurant, which I think is really good when they're eating the food. So initially, they go to the restaurant. They're given menus by this very pushy kind of waiter who's got a fake French accent, and he's like, "Oh yeah, what would you like?" And he says, "I will have the steak." He's like, "No, I need to know the number."
Yeah.
And he's like, "I'll have the steak rare." And he's like, "No, the number. I need the number." And he's like pointing to the what it is on the menu. And again, that's like he needs to have the number. He can't do anything unless he's been given the number, even though it makes no difference. He knows what Sam wants, but he has to have the number.
Yeah.
And then so the waiter goes and immediately returns with these plates of colored mush that's just on this plate, and there's a picture of what the food's supposed to be like, so you can kind of look at it and eat it. It just reminds me exactly of like what you expect like corpse starch to look like when you're kind of fed by the imperial forces. This kind of this nutrition mush basically. But everyone just assumes that because it's in a fancy restaurant, a fancy there's waiters going on, and whilst we're in that scene as well, there's an explosion, and we kind of see into what Sam. He isn't a great character really. Like when you actually start thinking about it, his mum. There's an explosion. People are hurt. People are like lay on the floor, like with burns and bleeding. And his mum says, who's not the nicest of people anyway. And she says, oh, shouldn't you be doing something? He's like, no, I'm on my lunch break. And he just carries on eating. And there's literally, and the band carries on playing. It's such a regular occurrence that no one really cares that this is going on or this has happened. And I think later on as well, there's another attack. I don't think they're attacks, in the department store. And Sam doesn't really care about anyone else. He's just looking for Jill. Like he's literally almost like pushing other people aside, these like victims. And then even then, when he does find her and realize she's alive, it takes Jill to be like, help these people. And that's only when he starts to help them himself. But up to that point, he's been very much kind of passive to what is going on in the world. And you kind of still see that even when he's kind of managed to escape the actual machine a little bit, he's still very much that same person who's been shaped and formed and grown up in this kind of apathetic system.
Yeah, so. I think that's exactly right. And because it's interesting in that thing with the menu and the fact that he just refuses to say the number. He doesn't want to.
Yeah.
Kind of speaks to how Sam, even though he's part of the system and shaped by the system, he's also, it's not resentment, but he like thinks he's above it in certain ways.
Yeah.
That's why he helps Ian Holmes so much, his boss, because he's bending rules and doing things a little bit differently. That's why he even goes to deliver the check in the first place, because he's like, oh, I can solve this by doing it outside of the official sort of the way it's supposed to be done. And I think that you get that, so other people don't like him as a result of that. That's the reason the waiter doesn't like him. That's the reason Bob Hoskins and the the repairman doesn't like him, because he's willing to go outside of what he's supposed to do. And that is why he then does what he does to try and get Jill's address, and then that leads him down a route that gets him, imprisoned by the end of it, and results in Jill's death and others. So there's kind of this really interesting thing where he sort of brings a lot of stuff on himself because he doesn't conform in the way you're supposed to, and he abuses power and abuses like his position a little bit. That doesn't. So he's not a good guy. He's part of the system and also willing to abuse it.
Yeah.
But he's not the worst guy in this world by any means either. No. It's just really interesting because it does create this space of it's the absolute greyness of everything. But the only people who are innocent are the ones, you could say Jill is innocent. She just is she gets sucked into this world by Sam. But pretty much everybody else who, is guilty in some way of perpetuating the system or holding it up or just just following orders or whatever it might be. It is just a sad world. It's a very grey, very bleak world. And that's the point. That's the whole point. That's why you have to. The movie's all about trying to find your escape. Like you say, everyone's got their own different version of escape. For Sam, initially, it was his dreams where he's flying and there's nothing around him. It's just clouds and he's free. By the end, it's something else. He essentially is living in that dream by the end of the movie. So it's an incredible film. It's an incredible watch. I think it has so many interesting lessons to learn and like warnings about the world and things that are super relevant today when it comes to the sort of the technology and the world we live in now. Super relevant to that early conception of 40K and how how a lot of the bureaucracy and the Imperium worked or didn't work, and the greyness that pervades everything. I think we probably could continue talking about Brazil for many more hours.
Yes,
but we've got another not a film this time, but we've got another thing to talk about, which I think has some interesting, at least it sort of parallels in certain ways, but spirals out in a very different way from Brazil. So this is the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the TV version from 1981 that was broadcast on the BBC, just one season, 6 episodes. And this is very much you kind of, in a way, start from a similar place of bureaucracy
Yeah.
and the sort of passivity of the main character, Arthur Dent, who is played by Simon Jones, who, as we said, was in Brazil very briefly.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, there is he is basically Arthur Dent wakes up, his house is about to be bulldozed because they want to build a bypass, or they want to build a
Yeah.
road through his house. Ends up being the least of his problems because it turns out that within a certain number of minutes, the Earth is also going to be bulldozed in its entirety because the Vogons, an alien race, are building a space bypass
Yeah.
through the planet Earth. And this then leads Arthur Dent, because his best friend Ford Prefect is an alien who's
Yeah.
undercover on the planet, to write about the Hitchhiker's Guide, or for the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Arthur and Ford Prefect manage to stow away on the Vogon's ship before it destroys the Earth, and then they go on an incredible adventure for 6 episodes. So
Mhm.
it's written by Douglas Adams. It's based on his
Yeah.
own radio show. So it's the same story,
Yeah.
but he's sort of revisited stuff as he's rewritten it. Obviously, there
Yeah.
would later be a film.
Yeah.
There's been all sorts of different versions of it. There's been sequels. There's been continuations. There's books that Douglas Adams would go on to write. The whole thing is just a very funny, very silly. It's satirical, but it's also just silly for the fun of it. I mean, what's your relationship with the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Pete?
So it was really interesting because when you asked me to pick a film, I picked Brazil, and then you came to me with like an accompaniment to that one, and you said Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It was really probably one of the perfect fits. I think both from a point of view of it being matched in the film, but also it was probably so. I got into Warhammer. I first got into Warhammer it was about early 2000s, and it was with the Lord of the Rings bi-weekly Battle Games and Middle Earth magazine.
Right.
And that's how I kind of grew into Lord of the Rings, and then 40K from there. And it was around about that time that there was, I don't know if you remember this, in 2003, the BBC had this thing called the Big Read. And it was basically a big kind of drive to kind of find who had the most kind of, who was Britain's favorite book,
Right.
author, things like that. So they kind of came up with this top 200 lists of novels, and there was like TV shows and stuff like that. Lord of the Rings won, by the way, got number one. And then I think I checked on this. I've got the list here. I think, if I remember right, there's about 17 entries of the Discworld series in that top 200.
Right.
Which it's kind of so around that time is when I kind of got into Discworld, and then also Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, because I think Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy got number 4
Right.
at the top 200. So it kind of popped up, and there was there was a TV show that accompanied it, and it was like a little bit of to do stuff around books, and it was trying to get more people reading and find out what the top ones. And yeah, so Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy got number 4, and it was as a result of that following Christmas, I think this is like in the September, and the following Christmas I got the book Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and I read it, and I read the sequels as well. And then the film came out a few years later, and it was the first time that I'd read the book before. It was first instance I remember reading a book before seeing the film, and I was really disappointed by the film. And this is when you gave me the choice. I was like, let's go for the TV series rather than the film,
Right.
because the film goes initially it follows the line and the throughput of the book, but the TV show is much more kind of true to the book than the film is. But yeah, I started, and that kind of got me into that kind of sci-fi, that humorous side of sci-fi as well. All the kind of sci-fi that I'd seen in the past was much more serious, like Star Wars and those kind of films. So it was kind of my first taste of that. And it was from that I started reading the Discworld books as well. And yeah, it is, as a TV show, it is kind of made at the very similar time as Brazil. So there's like a lot of kind of stylistically, it's quite similar at times as well. I don't know if that's just like the low budget British aesthetic of filmmaking that you
Sure,
kind
it
of
might
have
be.
from
Yeah.
that. But yeah, there is the beginning especially is very much this kind of this hint of bureaucracy. When Arthur Dent's house is getting bulldozed, the guy who's kind of who's in charge of it getting bulldozed comes along. Oh, well, this the planning application's been available in your local planning council, and it's like I had to go all the way to London to find it, and it was in a basement, in a disused toilet, in a locked filing cabinet. That's what I had to do to find this application to put against. And then when the Vogons arrive and they're about to destroy the planet, the Vogon I forget the name of it. He's saying, "Well, I don't know why you're complaining." Says the plans for this space bypass have been in your most local like planet in Alpha Centauri or something like that. And it's just kind of the absurdistness of like this same hiding behind this like really. Oh, well, we did. It was available for you. You could have seen it. Like, oh,
Yeah.
no way you would have seen it unless you knew where it was. Of being able to fly light years to get to the other planet. But there's a great line in the TV show. It's in the book as well, and it talks about the Vogon constructor fleet, and it's saying that the ship hung in the air in the same way that a brick doesn't. I think is the line, and it's. I think that line just sums up exactly how the rest of the writing goes on. It's like how a brick doesn't, and it's great because it looks like a brick. It's just a very kind of utilitarian spaceship. It's not anything fancy or pretty or in anything way, and it is a brick, but it just kind of it's almost like it shouldn't be flying because it's
Yeah.
not aerodynamic. It should not be in the sky at all. But yeah, like you said, the planet gets destroyed, and that kind of starts Arthur Dent's and Ford Prefect's journey through the galaxy. And there's all these lovely vignettes that you kind of get in the TV show where the Hitchhiker's Guide takes over and becomes rather than just being a straight up piece of exposition, it really feels like a world building, and they're all little jokes, and there's a little bit about the Pangalactic Gargle Blaster and the Babel Fish, um, and I watched after rewatching the TV show, I watched a making of documentary which was made
Mm.
a few years later, and if you watch the TV series, all of the animations were like done like on cellophane and literally
Incredible.
like with light shone through to change the colors, and
Yeah.
it's really cool. It'd be so easy to do something like that in like After Effects or like modern day editing programs, but at the time you had to have this person who sat down and hand drew all these transitions and hand animated them frame by frame. And yeah, it's just a fantastic piece for such like a low budget production as well.
Yeah.
It's just fantastic.
Yeah, amazing. And the hand animation, like even down to like the text, so the text is sort of being typed on screen as things
Yeah,
progress. All of that's hand animated. I mean, it was award
yeah,
winning at the time as well.
yeah, yeah,
You can totally understand why. But yeah, that conceit of the actual Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which Arthur Dent gets a copy early on from Ford,
yeah,
and it's actually like it's almost kind of like a I don't want to say an iPad or a Zune. It kind of is
yeah,
bigger than
yeah,
that, but it's
yeah,
a physical device with a little screen that you can then read. You know, and obviously
yeah,
it's got all the information in the world on. It's kind of quite prescient. You know, it's a smartphone essentially with Wikipedia on it,
yeah,
but you know, like an 80s version of that. And the book, you get all of these different sequences throughout the series where we just hear from Peter Jones, who is the voice of the book in the show and in the radio show as well, just reading out like a little entry, like you say, a world building entry, a box out
yeah, yeah,
for here is this thing from the universe that's just really interesting and really weird and completely alien. You know, and so you do get like weird cocktails that are so strong they'll kill people, and you get
yeah,
the Babel fish, like you say, which is a universal translator, which is
yeah,
actually a specific fish that you
yeah,
put in your ear,
yeah,
and the fish lives on like information coming in. That's what its food is, and
yeah,
then it just sort of essentially excretes translations
yeah,
from that information, which is very silly and very fun. But then the book goes even further and to explore how this has then underpinned sort of philosophical thought in the universe,
yeah,
because it then proves that there isn't a god because it's so specific. Like
yeah.
it's such a specific creation. Like
It
if it's
must have been
evolved,
made. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. It would
yeah,
have to have been made, which would then prove the existence of God. But then if God created something so specific that it proved his own existence, then he would have. He's giving the game away
yeah,
essentially,
yeah,
so he
yeah. It's a
can't exist.
paradox.
It
Yeah,
disproves him. So it's just this very silly, fun stuff. And there's loads of that. I mean, I'm sure
yeah,
everyone will be familiar with the answer to life, the universe, and everything, like the
yeah,
meaning of life and the universe and everything. that comes up here. They've built a sort of special computer to answer this question that takes millions of years to process the question and then come up with an answer and all this sort of stuff. So there's all of these big philosophical questions and thoughts, but it's all filtered through just absurd silliness. That's
Yeah,
brilliant. It's so much
yeah.
fun. It's just really, really good.
It's great because there's like in the book there's the Encyclopedia Galactica, which is like the competing information resource to the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. But everyone buys Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy because it's a little bit cheaper, even though it's not as accurate or maybe not as comprehensive about certain subjects. It's a little bit cheaper and it has "Don't Panic" written in big friendly letters on the cover,
Yeah.
and it kind of that just explains so much that maybe people would rather go for something which is a little bit worse, but if aesthetically it makes them feel a bit better or is a little bit cheaper, they'll go for it.
Yeah.
And it's full of these little kind of quips and points. And I will say one thing in the film's defense, there is a little bit where you get more Vogons in the actual film version because they go to a to go to kind of it's like a bureaucratic office, and they kind of have that extra little scene where they're kind of queuing up in this kind of very heavy paperwork system that the Vogons operate in to figure out what's going on. And it's interesting because Douglas Adams also was involved in a few video games as well. There was a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy text adventure game,
Mm.
but there was also a game that he made called Bureaucracy, and that was a text adventure game. And it literally is about, I think you're trying to get a change of address form or something like that, and the whole game just revolves around you going from pillar to post, and it's very Brazil in its kind of style, which is quite a nice, again, another nice link to the two. But it's great because I recently, funny enough, after we spoke, my wife was trying to get some records from the doctors. Like I think they weren't. We moved doctors a few years ago, and we were trying to get the records from one place to the other. And just the hassle, they're having to go to one person, say to this person, they're like, "Oh no, I can't do anything because you need to go to this person." And then we'd send an email to someone else and be like, "Oh no, this is for something else. You need to send an email for this." And all we wanted was just some medical records to get to our current doctor, and it was just such. I don't even think we even got it sorted in the end because it just ended up like going around in circles that much, and just that small amount of frustration just in that one thing, and you kind of realize why that permeates the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy so much, and why it's kind of such a big point in Brazil. But yeah, the Hitchhiker's Guide is much more kind of lighthearted, and it's quite a nice thing to watch after you've watched Brazil, just to kind of perk yourself up a little bit.
Yeah.
It's much more colorful.
Yeah, I mean, I think the satire, and it's pretty gentle because
Yeah,
it's pointing out the silliness of these things.
yeah.
It's still super relevant. Like you say, that is still absolutely the way, if not more stuff operates in that
Mhm.
way now. You cannot ever get through to customer services now. You've got to do it all online, and then that redirects you to whatever else. Like all of this stuff, it is very much just saying this is how society works. Like we do this to ourselves in so
Yeah,
many ways. And whilst yes, the Earth has been destroyed and everybody is dead except for two humans who have sort of stowed away, which is Arthur Dent and another character, Trillian. Like other than that, the stakes are not they're quite low, right? It's
mhm.
gentle. It's very
Yeah, yeah,
humorous. You're never really afraid that Arthur is going to die, even though there are times when it seems like he's going to die. Ultimately, it's all nice and safe, and that then is just a vehicle to kind of point out all of this silliness and absurdity
yeah.
and just have some fun with it. I do not envy the makers of the film trying to sort of contain it into a sort of cinematic narrative. And I think
Yeah,
that's the reason you get loads of Vogons by the end of the movie, right? Because you have
yeah.
to that you kind of like, well, there has to be some resolution, there has to be an arc.
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
show, there's not really an arc at all.
No, no.
By design, they're hitchhikers going around the
Yeah,
galaxy. The whole point of it is to just here are 6 fun things that you can enjoy in the galaxy,
yeah,
whilst you're there.
yeah.
And sure, there is more about the nature of the Earth itself, and ultimately the Earth is reconstructed because it turned out the planet was built as a
Hmm.
supercomputer for mice who were trying to solve those big questions of the universe. So the Earth does get rebuilt, but you're basically just like jumping around and kind of like, going off on like we're going to go to the restaurant at the end of the universe,
Yeah.
milliways, just
Yeah.
just for fun,
Yeah.
basically, and super arbitrary as well because they end up going to the restaurant at the end of the universe because they're about to die somewhere else in the universe.
Yeah.
An explosion is about to happen that would kill them all, so they just end up popping into out of reality and out of time into this other place completely arbitrarily, but it doesn't matter because you kind of
No.
you're having these fun adventures. I
It's
think
quite interesting because those transitions are, I think, whilst other sci-fi series, books, films will have those same kind of transitions happen, they'll try to explain it away with like much more like logical and sound reasoning. Whereas Hitchhiker's Guide, we're not going to worry about that. We're just going to give you more jokes.
yeah.
You figure out there's some strange sci-fi things going on there, but have some more jokes. Forget about that bit. Have the jokes. Have a cow that's been bred to be wanted to be eaten, and
Oh god, yeah, horrendous.
yeah, it's like again, that's quite a dark thing to happen, but and Arthur's like horrified by it, but no one else really sees any issues with
Yeah,
this like genetically modified cow, and
it's a
it's such a
brilliant.
strange thing.
Yeah, it is really strange, but it's such a brilliant sort of philosophical question as well. Because it's like a cow or a pig or what? It's some kind of creature
Yeah,
that
it's
has been
yeah,
bred specifically to want to be eaten. Like they bring it out alive to the table, and it's like, oh, you might enjoy this part of me. You might want these. This particular cut of meat tastes amazing if you fancy this.
yeah,
And Arthur's like, oh my god, that's horrendous that you want to be eaten. It's really gross. And then the creature is just like, oh, would you'd rather I didn't want to be eaten? You'd rather eat me
yeah,
when I wanted to live? And
yeah.
it's actually like a really fun sort of clever little. Yeah, I guess that is quite a curious
It is,
thing.
but
Yeah.
an interesting thing as well. He was actually played by Peter
Right.
Davison, and that kind of ties quite nicely into Douglas Adams again, because Douglas Adams did write a few serials for Doctor Who back in the day,
Right.
and one of the serials that he wrote was called The Pirate Planet, I think, and there's a robot captain in that who is it cannot be anything other than the archetype that the Adeptus Mechanicus was based on, because he's got like all mechanicals down on one side, he's got all mechanical augmentations on one side of his face, and he's wearing like a red trimmed robe as well. And it's like such. I think I've seen people like talk about this before as being like it must be the inspiration because it's around the right time that the people who were developing the artwork, and it's so similar. Like it could literally, it looks like maybe like a low quality kind of low cost cosplay of a tech priest, but
Right.
it's that close. And if you ever get a chance to just kind of have a look for the Pirate Planet, I think there's some scenes on YouTube that you can kind of have a look at. But it is literally the Adeptus Mechanicus, and
Amazing.
yeah, obviously Douglas Adams kind of was very much heavily involved in and a lot of that kind of sci-fi from that time. He wrote a few serials for Doctor Who, I think. He also was one of the few writers, if I remember rightly, who was actually a non-Python writer on Flying Circus. I think he
Right.
wrote a couple of sketches for that one as well. He was like, there's only like two other non-Python writers on that, and he was one of them. So again, it's quite a nice link back to
Sure. Yeah.
Brazil and that kind of like Python-esque universe. But yeah, I think it was an excellent kind of pick. Really, it kind of complements the two very nicely. Even though it's very different in tone, I think the
Mhm.
themes are very similar.
Yeah, yeah. I think that the system and the way in which systems work and rule the galaxy, that we saw in Brazil, I think that's very much part of this and sort of making sense of your world. Whether that's by using something like the Hitchhiker's Guide itself, which,
Yeah,
as you say, is not always that accurate,
yeah,
or it's by trying to understand the bureaucracy and trying to understand what's going on. I think that Rick Priestley has said that Douglas Adams' work and Hitchhiker's Guide in particular, I think he's more thinking of the radio show, but he has
yeah.
mentioned the TV show as well as being quite relevant to his sort of
Mhm.
conception. I think it's less specific, like Brazil. It's not like they would
Yeah,
like, oh, I'm going to take that and drop it into the
yeah, yeah,
40K universe. I think it's the same kind of thing of like absurd bureaucracy, absurdist levels of bureaucracy and the scale of this thing and what that then results in the universe. and all of the weird and wonderful stuff that can exist in the universe. Like you can have an entire planet that is just a computer that exists to be a computer. Like those kinds of things found their way into the creation of 40K. And now that, there's a lot of that at work, I think, rather than, oh, we're going to take that. I would also say, much like Terry Pratchett, Douglas Adams, like the way in which he names characters and the way in which he has those sort of characters running around, like there's a lot of fun. I'm going
Slotty Bartfast, I think is one good character. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's silly, but it works, right?
Yeah. He's an alien at the end of the day, so his name would be a strange name. That's completely expected. It's something that's in the books, not the films or the TV shows. I don't think they ever got that far with it. But there's one of the other scenes later on. There's a tank, which is a like a robot tank, and I think I forget his name now. Brain the size of a planet.
Oh, is it Marvin the paranoid
Marvin
android?
the robot? Yeah, yes, that's it. So he's kind of facing off, and there's this like machine that's a tank. It's very, very much like 40K, and he basically depresses the tank so much that the tank just like it's on like a walkway between two skyscrapers, and it just like destroys the walkway that it's on and just like crashes because it's so angry and it gets so depressed by its like lot in life. And it's just a great scene. I mean, the whole book series is kind of full of those. There's a god, a rain god, who doesn't realize he's a rain god. He's actually just a HGV driver. And he's just everywhere he goes, it rains, and he never really quite realizes it until and he's actually just like reincarnation of like this Norse rain god or something. And there's some strange things in the book. I think there's a bit where you can fly by falling over and then forgetting to hit the floor,
right?
And you just kind of will start to fly. Yeah.
And I mean, that's kind of feels quite Pratchett-esque as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But that kind of thing, that's what you see throughout it, and Douglas Adams' work just generally is kind of taking phrases or thoughts and common sense and kind of just twisting it just a tiny little bit and being like, well, what if you just said no to that instead of yes? These kind of things that then lead to just, they are surreal, absurd nonsense ideas.
Yeah.
But when you put them into a world and say, no, actually they're all true though, and they do work, and these kind of things do, it is fantastic. I mean, the ultimate resolution of the entire thing is that they end up having left the restaurant at the end of the universe. They just, so because of an improbability drive, that is the reason that Arthur and Ford survive getting spaced by the Vogons. They throw them out into space because they don't want them hitchhiking on their ship. And then Trillian, who is also left Earth, but she's left with a chap called Zaphod Beeblebrox, who is the president of the universe or the galaxy, who's just a really cool dude, man, with 2 heads and 3 arms. They're on like a gallivant, and they've got improbability drive in their spaceship, which when you turn it on, something weird happens. The least probable thing happens. In this case, it takes Arthur and it takes Ford out of space and just puts them into the ship. And then the 4 of them team up and sort of go on a few adventures because Zaphod wants to find Magrathea, which is where worlds are built, because it's a long lost ancient planet. And that is where we then find out that they were building a new version of the Earth to replace the one that's just been destroyed. But then they almost die, and the 4 of them end up teleporting to the restaurant at the end of the Earth, at the end of the universe. And then they get separated, and it's just never explained. So we don't know what happens to Trillian and Zaphod Beeblebrox. No. They just disappear from the story because ultimately, they were hanging out for most of it, but not all of it. And Ford and Arthur end up on an Earth, and they find out, or they end up on a spaceship rather. That crashes into a planet that turns out to be Earth. And it's very convoluted but funny history of this alien race of humanoids who were going to go to a new planet. So they put everyone onto a spaceship, or they put loads of people onto a spaceship and sent them off to this new planet. But they actually put all of the people they didn't want.
It was like the middle managers and
all
kind
the
of people
middle
that they
managers,
thought as like the useless jobs kind of thing. Yeah,
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 the hairdressers,
yeah.
and stuff, folks like that.
It's the
They've got a really
telephone sanitizers was one of them as well. I think it was.
right.
That was, and it's quite an important point because they send all these people off, and the expectation is that they all be following shortly behind.
Yeah,
but they never do. They just
all the
send out the
scientists
initial
and stuff will follow.
Yeah,
later.
so they all stay back on the planet, just get rid of the. But then the actual inhabitants of the planet are wiped out by a plague that started out on a unsanitized telephone. So it was actually the fact that these people did leave that actually caused the downfall of the race in the end.
Yeah. So the only people who actually left that planet to go to this new world are the middle managers and the hairdressers and so on. And they end up crashing onto what turns out to be Earth, but in historical Earth, like many millions of years ago.
Yeah.
So it turns out that Arthur and Ford discover that the humanity is going to be descended from the quote unquote useless folks who were left from this other planet. So the barbers and the hairdressers and such. And that's basically the end of the story, is just Arthur and Ford just on this prehistoric Earth with a load of inept middle managers who are just debating, who not actually building shelter. They're not actually doing anything. They're literally just debating,
having committees. And
committees on what to do next and all this sort of stuff. The captain of the ship, it just loves having berths and is just sat in his his berth in the middle of nowhere.
There's a great line where there's like an economist there, and he's saying, "Oh, we've decided that we're going to use leaves as money." But because leaves keep growing and there's loads of them, we're going to have to start deforesting, just so that the value of the leaf doesn't plummet. And it is kind of it's like such a throwaway line. It seems really strange, but then it is kind of something you would imagine a modern day economist destroying a stockpile of something just so it keeps the value of it.
100%. It's so prescient. There's so many of those things as well, where it's just bang on. It's when you have it in the context of this, of like, we want leaves to be worth more, so we're going to destroy most of the leaves. Like, it's absurd and it sounds completely silly, but that absolutely is the way that modern business people think. A lot of them, I think. Well, no, let's not get any further into that because we'll go too far down into real politics and stuff. But yeah, there's loads of those really, really clever, prescient views that are just like, actually, at the heart of that joke is really biting satire about society and the way things work.
It's very much a situation where a joke will be made and you'll laugh at it, and then you'll kind of say, hang on, no, wait, that's actually a really good point, that is. And a lot of the time they almost pass you by the jokes too, because they're so quick and they're so, like, I think because it's adapted from a book, I think a lot of TV shows, when they're made for TV or made for films, they often have that kind of space where you can kind of let the joke settle in and you can react to the joke, but they're so quick fire that you don't always notice the joke straight away. And then afterwards you're like, oh, that's a good joke. And it's like, oh, actually, that's a really good point that you've made about the real world or this kind of system. And it's quite a good thing to watch on a second watch, because you can kind of see the cleverness behind the jokes. And I think as well, it's a TV show that's very much built on the strength of its writing. I think the sets are very much kind of like BBC 1980s kind of sets. They're a little bit wobbly at times, but I think they do well with what they've got. And like I said, the animations that they do were fantastic. I think they were probably the most technically impressive aspect of the entire show, with the little hitchhiker vignettes that it kind of goes off. But because it has such good writing, it kind of has such kind of nice pace of writing, it kind of allows you to look over that, even looking at it something that was made 40 odd years ago, written 45, 46 years ago now. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, interesting thing for me just around modern technology, which I thought was interesting. So I was watching for this on Amazon Prime Video. And whenever the stuff came up for the actual Hitchhiker's Guide, which obviously is a lot of text on screen, moving text, it obviously, the system at Amazon Prime Video thought that was the end credits. So it would automatically throw up, oh, do you want to just skip the credits? Do you want to watch the next episode? And it could be 5 minutes into an episode, and it would just automatically think, oh, you're at the end of the episode now because the credits are on. So I thought that was very interesting. Just a bit of like appropriately like nonsense technology, not
Yeah, yeah.
understanding
It
anything.
feels very much within the universe.
Yeah, it does. But then in terms of the sets, like you say, there's loads. Yes, there are some wobbly sets and some classic
Yeah.
sort of Doctor Who style stuff that you would have seen from that sort of era. I do think it's like so ambitious though, and what
Oh
they
yeah.
achieve on what
Yeah.
I imagine probably wasn't a very big budget is incredible. Like
Yeah.
the alien makeup and effects, all of the sets, all of the model work for a 6 episode TV show in
Mhm.
1981. I think is really fantastic. I mean, obviously, I don't want to say it sort of stands up in the sense that it looks like you're in space. It obviously
Yeah.
doesn't, but I do think that going back and sort of watching it with the context of like when this was made, how this was
Yeah.
made,
Yeah.
is what you guys have done fantastic work. It's really
Exactly.
really
I think
good.
I think as well what's good about the TV show, which is something that the actual film shied away from, is obviously Zaphod Breedable has got
Hmm.
two heads. And the way they got around that in the film was kind of he had like a head underneath his beard, and like
Sure.
he would head a throw back and there'd be another head. So most of the time he was just like he just had a single head. But they built a full animatronic head that sat on his shoulder, and he had like an extra arm, and sometimes someone would just stood behind him and kind of have the arm like reaching through to be this third arm when it needed it. Most of the time, it was kind of like just tucked in a pocket. But that was incredibly ambitious, I think, for the time.
Yeah,
Like they
yeah.
could have gotten around it. They could have done something similar to the film did, but they thought, no, we're going to build a quite creepy looking head, I
Oh
would
yeah.
say. It's incredibly kind of strange, but it kind of its eye can move. It's got an eye patch, so it's got one eye and it moves around, and its mouth can move. I think it broke a few times because of, but I think it was. I don't know if it was maybe like a making of or something like a beat. It was maybe even like Blue Peter, and they had this animatronic head, and they opened it up inside, and it's just like these servos, and um, it's quite impressive again for a TV budget for a British sci-fi show, which traditionally had a lot of like hard time getting decent budgets
Hmm.
in from the BBC, because a lot of the kind of the guys who headed up these departments weren't really into it. I mean, Doctor Who got cancelled at one point, and
Mhm.
one series of Doctor Who was entirely set on Earth because they didn't really have a budget to go flying around space, and that was just because the heads didn't really like it. So from to kind of get that, I think part of it was because we had the pedigree from the book and the radio series, so it's kind of like an established there. But yeah, they did a fantastic job with what they had, and it can look a little bit kind of iffy at times, but I think, like you said, if you look at it within the context of how it was created, it's actually incredibly impressive.
Yeah.
Um, Really well done. And there's a lot of on location stuff as well that happened. There's a cottage at the beginning, which is Arthur Dent's. There's the pub, which is really nice. And then later on, when they're actually on Earth, they're kind of actually outside, and you kind of get that nice kind of um, typical for the time, where the film grade completely changes depending on whether they're inside. I think was it Monty Python that did a sketch about that?
Oh,
I think there
I'm not
might
sure.
I might be confused with a sketch around the time where they used to have to change because of the cameras that they could use in a studio situation versus the cameras they could take out and about with them.
Right.
Whenever it was an indoor shot versus an outdoor shot, the film grain would change. And I think it was kind of the sketch happened on Monty Python where they were indoors and outdoors, and they kind of broke the fourth wall.
I
Anyway,
can
I might
believe
be getting
that.
confused, but
Yeah.
I think it might have been Monty Python. But yeah, it's kind of like got that aspect to it of the time where an indoor shot looks very different from an outdoor shot.
Hmm.
But yeah, really, I think it was a fantastic choice to kind of pair with Brazil. I think it has that same kind of throughput of absurdism, that kind of aspect of satire in there as well. I think that the two mesh very well. I think initially you wouldn't group them, I
Hmm.
think, but if you've watched them both and you would know what they are very much two sides of the same coin, I think, in
Yeah.
regards to what they are. But yeah, I very
Yeah, I
much
think
agree.
so. Yeah, and it's very interesting. I often wonder, like, did this show sort of pave the way for stuff like Red Dwarf as well? And those
Yeah,
kinds of
yeah.
shows and things of that nature. But it's an incredible show. I think it's very funny. It's charming and
Mhm.
enjoyable in all the right ways. Even its rough edges, whether that's special effects, whether that's certain performances, whether that's like some of it is a little bit rough. but in a charming way, in a quite a
Yeah.
winning sort of in a style, and it still holds up as a very fun show to watch and lots to enjoy. Yeah, I think as 40k fans, as Warhammer fans, although it's so different in so many
Mhm.
ways,
Yeah.
in no way you're going to be looking at Hitchhikers going, oh yeah, that's the same thing. There are elements within its humor, its sense of humor in particular, but also its satire and its sort of
Yeah. Yeah.
its conception of alien races and some of the things that, like
Hmm.
how they interact and how
Yeah.
small the individual is on the grand scheme of the universe.
Hmm.
Like a lot of those are quite similar to 40k
Yeah.
and how 40k
Yeah.
works. So I think there is a lot to enjoy there as well
Yeah.
in
You
that
can
sort of
you
relationship.
can see how it may not have like directly inspired it, but it was definitely something that the people who were writing the background, developing the games, doing the artwork, they were very much aware of and probably were fans of at the same time. And as a result of that, that kind of influence come through, even if it's not like a conscious kind of throughputs. They maybe it's kind of like guided them and given them an idea of what sci-fi could be. It doesn't have to be this kind of very stuffy, very kind of everything's very serious. It can have a little bit of a tongue in cheek. You can have absurdism there to highlight real world and 40k more so in the past I think than it is now, but it kind of has line of like satire through it. And Douglas Adams has done quite a lot of writing for other like satirical um I can't remember some of the, I remember looking at some of them. Obviously, Dirk Gently's Detective Agency as well. It's another kind of one from around about a little bit later. That one was, but that was. I've also had a couple of TV makes. I had a Netflix
Oh,
with Elijah Wood. Again, another Lord of the Rings reference. So we kind of going back around to those
yeah.
references. I mean, this is the thing. It's I mentioned Pete Davidson. He's him and the actress who played Trillian. Their daughter was also in Doctor Who, played the Doctor's daughter, and she went on to marry David Tennant.
Right.
And it's her son who was also in Game of Thrones and one of the
Huh.
not Game of Thrones, the House of the Dragon.
Oh, right.
So
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
he played one of the Targaryen children. But yeah, so it's like such. It's great. I mean, it's kind of like that 7 Degrees of Kevin Bacon kind of thing, but like
Sure.
pretty much every actor who's like a well-known British actor has had something to do with Doctor Who, probably EastEnders, or like almost like how every Australian actor seems to have had been on Neighbours. It's kind of like the same kind of thing, like Doctor Who, and those kind of things. And it's quite funny because you start to look at these actors that have appeared in one thing, and then it's like, oh, well, they were in there, and they're married to this person, or they're the son of this person, or daughter of this person, and it is this kind of almost like incestuous family tree of like British actors who've been in everything.
Yeah.
It's just quite funny to watch.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I love about the sort of the pop culture, sort of the British pop culture network around this era and the creation of Warhammer and 40k, because it's so in line with all that, what's happening
Yeah.
in film, in television, in music, in art, is
Mhm.
all sort of permeating and running through the Citadel Design Studio, because that's what the folks who worked there were spending their time doing. So
Yeah.
although it actually ends up, you create something very, very different out of the back of it, the things they were reading and listening to and watching, all of that does have a relationship. There is a dialogue between all
Yeah.
of this stuff and Warhammer and 40k, which I think is fascinating
Mhm.
to sort of unpick it a little bit, just to
Yeah.
acknowledge some of that and really and sort of take a little look at some of it, just for fun, because I think it's a fascinating topic. But I know we could talk, Pete, many more hours. There's so much stuff within Hitchhikers that we've not even touched on, but I can't steal all of your time for this, as much fun as it would be. So I really appreciate you joining me, Pete, on the Warhammer Film Club. It has been absolutely fantastic to chat.
Thank you very much for having me. I think it's been nice to kind of continue the series from chat that you had with Mike. Started off with Time Bandits, we've done Brazil now, so we can kind of you just need someone else to come up with it. Is it the Baron
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 Munchausen,
Munchausen?
yeah,
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 yeah.
that's the one. So you need someone else to come and do that one in the future now, and we can have the full trilogy. And
I think so.
uh,
I think there's plenty of Gilliam to go, because good
yeah,
Jabberwocky as well, which I think
yeah,
is well worth touching on. Such an influential figure in sort
mhm,
of war in the context of Warhammer creation, I
yeah,
think. So yeah,
yeah,
it's been
definitely.
great to get an opportunity to talk about it, and it's been so much fun. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been great.
On the next episode of the Warhammer Film Club, legendary Games Workshop games designer Jervis Johnson chats about some of the movie influences on his work over his 40-year career. And you can listen to the entire season right now at patreon.com/Jordan Sorcery.